Welcome to the Maria Heller Show, the internet's original podcast. Since the year 2000, always ahead of the curve, always on your side. A true warrior for truth and justice, Meria and her guests leave nothing out, and no one is off limits. There is only one truth, the rest is lies. Sit back, enjoy the education with a true daughter of Mother Earth. Sharp New York wit, spiritual knowing, and a very dry sense of humor, Meria will dissect the news and lies to make it all palatable. Education is power. Meria delivers rapid-fire truth like no one else can. Here she is, the mouth that roars, the legendary Meria Heller.
Good morning, world. Meria here, alive and kicking. And here we are on the summer solstice. So whatever you're doing today, get outside and try to connect to the good energy that comes in on the summer solstice. But today I've got quite the interview for you. He's been on the show before when we talked about his book, Hidden History. You can also go into the archives and listen to that one as well if you're a new listener. Donald Jeffries, he has written, in my estimation, what is the book of the year. Okay, and as you know, I referred you this week, and I'm going to say it one more time. Not only should you get a copy for yourself, but you need to get a copy for everybody you know. I don't know if they're offering discounts on this book if you buy in bulk, but this is a book that would amazingly change America, I feel, in nanoseconds if people understood the real problems out there. You can vote all you want, you can protest all you want, but until you understand what the real story is, nothing's going to change. The book is Survival of the Richest, How the Corruption of the Marketplace and the Disparity of Wealth Created the Greatest Conspiracy of All. So I want to say good morning to Donald. Good morning, Donald.
Thanks for those kind words there, Maria.
Well, listen, it's an amazing book. I mean, I should have just not even bothered marking it up at all because I ended up marking up the whole book. And the facts and figures and information you have in here are this answers all the questions that I myself have had for years. So I just thought it was smoking hot. It's still smoking hot. No one's getting my copy. If they want to read it, they're going to have to buy their own. And it's a keeper. It's a keeper book. You know, yesterday, I'm sure you know that another stolen election happened in Georgia, and everybody's so surprised today. There was more money. I think they said this was the most expensive race in the history of America between, in a race that most of us never would have paid attention to. And when I looked at that, I immediately went online and posted, cross-check Greg Pallister's work, how many voters, again, turned away. And unless people understand how we've been disenfranchised and that our votes don't matter, nothing's going to change. And again, more reason for people to understand how you simply explain everything. This is not a hard book, folks, to get through. You will sit there aghast at what you're reading, but it's going to register and it's going to hit home. So, Donald, I have to tell you, this book is even better than your other one, and I thought Hidden Histories was great.
Well, I really appreciate the compliments, and I hope people do read it. I think it's important, and it's for once, because we talk a lot about how, especially the poor and the working class, never vote in their own interests, and a lot of that I think has to do with the way the mainstream liberals have alienated, especially white working class voters, with the social justice warrior type of stuff, and I think they because they oppose that so much, they just don't understand that by voting most of the time voting for Republicans, unless it's a renegade type, a Ron Paul type. They're telling you what they want. I mean, the guy that won in Georgia, the woman that won in Georgia was coming out and saying, I don't believe in a livable wage. And, it's the people that don't have livable wages, I don't understand how they can go for that. But unfortunately, and as you mentioned, obviously there's always the threat and the reality of voting fraud in all these elections, as we know from what happened with Bernie Sanders.
All right.
So it's unfortunate. The corruption is everywhere, and the country is divided. But there's a huge chunk of the country, probably almost half of them, and I see it all the time when I'm reading conspiracy forums and so forth. the attitude is there. These are working class, blue collar, sometimes even unemployed people who just resent so much people on welfare and food stamps, and that's where their attention is drawn. And I think that's one of the important things about my book is that I'm trying to get people to look in the right direction. You know, you're caring so much about somebody getting $150 a month or $80 or whatever it is for food stamps, like that's going to, you know, give you a life of luxury, but you always support the local NFL team owner, you know,
right?
you know, taking billions from you to build his stadium. And talk about capitalism. I mean, could any of us not succeed in that if we had someone else financing our projects and to an automatic moneymaker?
Right, I mean, and paying no taxes. You know, I always knew that the NFL didn't pay. That was tax exempt, but I did not know that even the National Hockey League is tax exempt. The golfing industry tax exempt.
Yeah.
So when people talk about, you know, the pathetic amount of money that they give people for food stamps, believe me, it's not enough to buy 1 week's worth of groceries, because I know people that have it. It's just ridiculous.
It is, and it's very hard to qualify for anything like that. And it's again, but it's for whatever reason, and that's the people you have to reach. You know, the people that are working class that are struggling too, and they're just, for whatever reason, they don't resent the billionaire,
right,
or the multimillionaire, and they somehow think those guys have worked hard, even though it's a lot. And I tell you, like, if I would urge readers to go to my blog and read. I have a couple of the deleted chapters in one from the book, because they really trimmed this book down considerably. And one of the big chapters I had was on the relations, and how almost anybody in public life today, whether it's a celebrity, politician, CEO, whatever, almost none of them came from humble origins. Virtually all of them came from at least upper middle class, most of them from great wealth. And I have that whole documented in one of the chapters on my blog if people wanted to see that, because that makes a mockery of not only a meritocracy, but this, you know, I worked hard and you did, because most of these people, you know, like Donald Trump's a perfect example. I mean, he was born the son of a multimillionaire.
Right.
It's a lot easier to become a billionaire if you start out in life as a multimillionaire. I mean, there's tons of examples like that, and people just, you know, Warren Buffett's father was a U.S. congressman. Bill Gates, we hear this mantra all the time, he came from middle class. Well, he came from a middle class that's different from most of us, because his father was president of Planned Parenthood. His mother, back in the 40s and 50s, when most women were home as housewives, was sitting on the boards of directors of these huge banks, and one of his grandfathers was a bank president. That's some middle class.
Right.
But that's the myth we're sold, because the idea is that,
right.
Look, he did it, you can do it too. And that's just not the way it works. I have tons of statistics in there that show you that the upward mobility is just not there, unless you're, an athlete or something maybe.
Right.
But other than that, it's, like I said, even with the entertainers, almost all the entertainers, it came from backgrounds that are certainly not humble.
Well, not just that. You make the case for nepotism. This week, one of the leaders in Germany slammed Ivanka Trump. And why is she being put out there as a diplomat? And he accused this administration of nepotism. What's the difference between the Trumps and the Husseins? Mustaches.
Right, exactly. Well, that's, I think most of this, and I think Trump, one of the many mistakes he's made, I think most of it expected him maybe to have his sons, have some kind of role in his administration, and they really don't. And where Ivanka really is, with her husband Kushner, Jared Kushner, who has all kinds of unsundry ties to Goldman Sachs and George Soros, and doesn't have, some of the populism that attracted a lot of people on Trump's part. You get past the crazy stuff, but he said a lot of populist things, and he's let so many people down because he doesn't have any of those people around him that believe that. I mean, everyone around him is a neocon, and these awful people like McMaster that are just would have been at home in a Jeb Bush administration. So it's been a great disappointment, because I know that most people probably didn't expect him to do anything, but that he said. But it would have been nice if he got up there once and talked about, I said I'd audit the Fed, let's audit it, and that kind of
Right, but how many years have we heard that? I don't know how old you are, but I've heard that since, after the assassination of Kennedy.
Right. Well, exactly, and that's the thing, and I think that's the reason why Trump still gets so much hate from the establishment, because it's not because he's really not doing anything threatening, but I think they know he's kind of, he's off, and he's such a loose cannon that, they're terrified that, who knows, he could wake up one day and go have a press conference and talk about Building 7 and 9/11, and I think that terrifies them that he might do that. I don't think he will.
I doubt that's ever going to happen.
Yeah, I doubt it too, but I think that must be, because other than that, I don't know. When he bombed Syria, he suddenly got great press. Suddenly, it was presidential.
Well, now we're getting deep into a new war in Syria.
Yeah,
here's this.
Most people don't realize the way this works. The three countries they're trying to demonize now. You have North Korea and Iran. They're the only two countries in the world that don't have a central bank, a Rothschild-owned central bank. And Syria has a central bank, but it's government-run, so it's not run by the international banker. So people, but they just get caught up in the demonization, and they don't realize why these countries are picked out. And it's not. I don't think that's a coincidence.
Of course
they
not.
They're the only countries, and they're playing along with the banking game.
Right. Well, when I read through your book, and it's a question I've asked for so many times, and I've had a lot of conversations with my friends about it through the years. Why is it that we always get not only the most unqualified people for office, and I think Trump is number one. I don't think I've ever seen anything quite like this. But we also worship and overpay, for whatever reason, celebrities, okay? Whether they're baseball players, whether they're movie stars, whether they're reality show. Now we're living the ultimate reality show with Trump. I don't understand why these people who are just doing their jobs, okay, and then to me a lot of them are pretty damn easy jobs, why they are so overpaid compared to what's supposed to be important. Our school teachers, our municipal workers, people that collect our garbage.
That's one of the points I made in the book. I don't know if you caught that or not, but one of the polls they took, and it really contradicts this notion that it's a conservative mantra that the marketplace is all knowing, and that it'll pay what the market will bear, and the marketplace knows everything, and the reason you don't make any money is because anybody can do your job. Anybody can mop that floor, anybody can hammer that nail, that kind of stuff. But no one ever questions, okay, well, can't anybody sit in a meeting and a vice president in charge of looking out the window and just be a yes man? I'm pretty sure anybody can do that and learn to, kiss their boss's butt.
Right.
Along, and that's what they do. But one of the polls that I had in there is for celebrities, is that they actually took a poll, and it was something like, I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but it was something like 96% of the people or something said they didn't want to see celebrities endorsing products. And then they also took a poll that showed that products endorsed by celebrities sold less well than ones that weren't. So there's the marketplace contradicting the unbelievable money. I mean, we talked about golfers and celebrities like that get tons of just merchandise that's worth so much. They don't have to pay for their clothes, their equipment, even the balls and the tees are expensive playing golf. It's like I said, it's become the new polo. It's
right.
not for the average person anymore. But so it's against their interest, but they still do it because they want to constantly reward the people that already have anything. And of course, it fits right in with the golden parachute phenomenon and all that, where all these failed CEOs, the Carly Fiorina types that run a company into the ground, do so terribly, and are given $40 million to walk away.
Right. Like the worse they do their job, the bigger their golden parachute. I mean, look at Rex Tillerson. Rex Tillerson walked away with $140 million.
Exactly, and he's rewarded, and he's considered an upstanding citizen that's qualified to be Secretary of State or whatever he is. And
I don't know. I think Jared Kushner's now Secretary of State since he's on his way to the Middle East.
I mean, Tillerson's certainly playing the game, but I mean, that's all those things contradict the notion that this is, and it's so hard, especially because I have a lot of libertarian beliefs too, and arguing with my libertarian friends, they just have this Ayn Rand, worship of the marketplace, and they actually, well, how do you explain that? It just, no matter, why, if you're, as I point out in my book, in many cases, probably most cases, the amount of bonuses that are paid out by these huge corporations exceed the profits that the company made that year. Mm-hmm. Now, what kind of business model is that? But,
Right. Plus, they're all getting subsidies, government subsidies, not paying taxes.
And they'll tell you, when the McDonald's workers and people like that struck for $15 an hour, they'll tell you that'll bring down the economy. Oh my God, if you do that, you won't be able to afford the burgers. Well, how can you? I mean, I talked about the 80-some-year-old Andrew McKenna, who I believe that McDonald's just to sit on their board of directors. I have a whole chapter on that where these guys have part-time jobs, or the Al Gores of the world attend 5 meetings a year for Apple and are paid $633,000. Now, how could you possibly do, there's nothing you could do in those 5 meetings. And I have people like Vernon Jordan, who sits on 10 of these boards of directors. Now, how could you possibly juggle 10 jobs and do any kind of a job with them? But they'll tell you somehow that's okay, and that doesn't raise the prices of whatever the products or services that company sells does. But if the lowest class of workers, if there's a 50-cent increase in the pathetic minimum wage, somehow that's going to cause prices to go up. But the millions and millions lavished on these executives has no impact on it. It's a ridiculous argument, and I wish, again, that's why the liberal Democrats, for the most part, are no better than the Republicans, because those are the arguments they should be making. They shouldn't be just the empty rhetoric about, yes, we do need a living wage, but it should be, I think the main problem in this country is the fact that the vast majority of people are not being paid enough when they have jobs, of course, and that doesn't even talk about all the people that are out of work, to meet the ever-increasing cost of living. It's a very simple math formula. If costs keep going up and your income doesn't.
Right. Well, I was just having that conversation. One of my friends stopped by yesterday while I was reviewing your book and making some notes, because I read the book a while ago. And we started talking about minimum wage. Now, her husband works 2 jobs. She works 3. And they don't live big, believe me. I would say that, perhaps their home is worth $150,000. Okay? They're neither one of them driving a new car. They're just getting by with 5 jobs between 2 people. And I said to her, when I started working, I guess it was probably 1965. The minimum wage was $1.10. And that's what I made. And I was part-time after school. I'd get on a subway, go into New York City, work 2 or 3 hours, come home, do my homework. That was my life. My first paycheck, Donald, was $13. Okay, now I had 6 members of my family besides myself. My mother, my father, 4 sisters. With that $13, I bought enough tokens for the subway for the next week to get to work, back and forth. And I bought every member of my family a present. And they weren't cheap presents. Like I bought my father, I remember, it was a tie and a handkerchief set. And I guess, and it was beautiful. I got in downtown Manhattan when we used to have really good shopping there. I think that set boxed was $1.50. So I said, now if you take that today where, minimum wage, they fought, tooth and nail not to create minimum wage here in Arizona, even though the voters voted for it, the Chamber of Commerce tried to stop it, to $10 pathetic an hour. You can't buy anything at the store for $10. When I leave the grocery store, I have 2 bags. That's usually $70.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that $70 would have filled the trunk of your car.
Right, exactly. And that's I think it's a generational thing too, because I came in at the tail end of the baby boomers, and we had a really unique set of circumstances with the post-war boom and the military-industrial complex that created a great standard of living for a while, for one generation. So we really don't, so many of my friends, they just don't have any empathy for the millennials and the people coming along, and they think it's just the way it used to be, that you just walk in any store and get a job. And in reality, things are they don't want to pay any money. They're paying less, and with what I call the college conspiracy, what they've done is they've let's talk about all the student. I have a section in there how much they're paying these people that run the colleges for the most kids. They talk about getting absurd amounts of pay, and for what they're charging these students, for the average student loan debt is over $30,000 a year, and unless you're going to, and that's another alarming stat, is you talk about upward mobility. The top colleges, the top 146 ranked colleges in the world, less than, 7%, no, I'm sorry, 3% of those from the bottom income quarter go to those top colleges. and only was it 10% come from the bottom half of the country. They go to the top colleges. Mm-hmm. So 90% of the students that are going to the top colleges, the ones that are going to ensure success, because a college degree doesn't ensure success anymore. It might get you a job making $30,000 a year,
right,
maybe even minimum wage. But the ones that go to the best colleges, where they're going to look at that and say, Ivy League, things like that, they're coming from 90% of them are coming from the top half of the country, the people that have everything, because we know that the bottom 50% of the country has less than 1% of the wealth now. I mean, we're not only a divided country culturally, but we're a divided country economically, especially because you talk about the haves and the have-nots. You have the 1% and the 1% of the 1% that has so much, and the 1% that has most everything, and then there's like a 20% or so below that run things that are doing well, and those are usually the ones that envy the 1% and want to get into the 1% and tell you to work harder, and they're doing okay, they're doing well enough, but it's the people below that, really the 80% that are struggling, but especially that and I call what's left of the middle class too, people like probably you and I are in, where there's like a 30% or so really people that's left of the middle class that's being squeezed out, because if you drop into that bottom 50% now, and since I wrote my book, it's gone from 40% to 50% that have less than 1% of the wealth, and that's why I wrote so much about immigration in the book too, which of course the left doesn't want to hear about, but with every wave of incredibly poor people coming from mostly south of the border, where do they enter society? They enter at the absolute bottom, so they add to that 50% that has nothing. They depress wages because they're being exploited, and I think the ultimate end game for all these people, these titans of industry, what they really want, I think, is to bring back slavery, and they can't do that.
Right.
So I think illegal immigration is the closest they can come to it, or at least, they'd probably like to have indentured servitude, but they want the cheapest labor possible. They want to give no benefits at all.
Right.
And then they demonize the Americans. When you complain about it, they either say you hate the immigrants, or they just say, well, you're just lazy. They're just doing the jobs Americans won't do, which is a slap. And I see it in my industry a little bit higher level. You have the visa workers, which Trump, again, one of the most disappointing things he did, he could have, with a stroke of a pen, he could have ended the H-1B visa program, which he claimed he was going to do. And he did put in a few more stipulations that supposedly tightened it up, but he didn't end it.
Well, because he uses it. That's where he brings his workers in.
Exactly.
That's how his wife got in the country.
Right, and these visa workers added to the illegal immigrants, that what they've done at the bottom is depress wages at the bottom scale, which were already low enough. But the visa workers and the slightly higher level, especially the IT industry, they have depressed wages there. And again, the people at the top are delighted. They love this because their bonuses are going up, because they cut the costs, and they don't reward the workers there. They don't give them stock options or bonuses. Instead, the bonuses are there. And we've come to expect that. And for some reason, people accept that. I said, it's like, you never used to see these astronomical bonuses. Why?
I don't know why. People must feel, somehow, listen, I think everybody still believes that they too can achieve that. When you're born in America, it's like saying, anybody can grow up and be president. But, you better have several $1 million if you think you're going to become president.
Exactly.
And they believe that everybody can be a star. I think a lot of these reality shows, Dancing with the Stars, or, all these other which I don't even watch any of them. I'm dealing with enough reality every day.
Right.
But, I really think that people believe we shouldn't be jealous of them, because I could be that too. I can talk to some young people and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And they say famous. And I said, well, famous for what? And they say, I don't care, just famous.
Right. And I think you wouldn't have gotten that 50 years ago, because at that time there were a lot more avenues to at least, and that's what we talk about. Another one of the attractions of Trump was when he talked about the factories that had closed and bringing the factories back, and which is Bernie Sanders was talking about that too. But whether that happened, I don't know. But I don't think you can at this point. But all those people that used to work in the factories were uneducated. They didn't go to college, and because college isn't for everyone. And I try to explain to people, the more people that go to colleges, the more diluted every college degree becomes.
Right.
And so you have to have somebody, all those people that used to work in the factories and had good jobs when there were strong unions, and they learned. And of course, the conservatives are really cool and say anybody can do that. But somehow they can never say anybody can just, can be an executive sitting in an office and be a yes man. To me, I can't think of a much easier job than that.
Right, or maybe playing ball for a living. I wanted to touch on what you said about the elite colleges. Because I do know, having read, Hidden History, where you stand on a lot of other things. Don't you see it as dumbing down the population where the majority of people couldn't get the education, even if they wanted it, because they can't afford it? And don't we see the results now in America of the uneducated just looking at social media and the things people say, and even the fact that they would vote against their own welfare?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, people, I think, mistake education for intelligence. I mean, most of the people in my life, to be honest with you, the people that have always seemed have more insight, open-minded, and really understand what's going on, most of them don't have college degrees. And the better degree they have, typically, like you talk to somebody from an Ivy League school, that mind is closed usually, and that's because they've gone through the indoctrination, and
right.
All the education does really at that level, it's not really educating, it's indoctrinating these kids into what is the consensus, the state consensus. And we know, if we've investigated a lot of these things, that much of it is distortion, a lot of it is just outright lies. Mm-hmm. But they are so confident. And because they've been bestowed, somebody from Harvard is so confident, you're never going to be able to call them,
No, it'd be like trying to argue with a born-again Christian. It's not going to happen.
It's the same kind of thing. It really is a religion. They have a dogma, and, you challenge anything about science, and they just go crazy. They have an absolute, Bill Nye, the science guy, who isn't even a scientist. But, these are the people that they trust, and these are because they've been promoted through their orthodoxy that they go to, and so it's very hard to, they just roll their eyes, and they're the main thing they're indoctrinated against, and is the fact that any conspiracy theories, and what they call conspiracy theories is basically anything I would say to them.
Right, or anything I would say.
Oh, okay, this is a conspiracy theory. And when you're challenging authority, you're challenging the orthodoxy. It's like, what are you talking about? And it doesn't compute. Whereas you talk to, your average blue-collar worker, that, he may not have proper English sometimes, but there's a lot of insight there.
Right, and they know more about what's going on sometimes.
I find, a lot more, I get a lot more out of talking with people like that. And but unfortunately, even there's too much, again, where you do find the people. I remember back when Reagan was president, where I used to argue with a lot of the people I was working with at that time because they loved him so much, and I kept saying, look at your paychecks. He's not cutting your taxes.
Right, trickle down.
Yeah, and they were so. I said, you didn't get a tax cut.
Right.
I would think you'd realize, but they just were. Again, even back then, you had that kind of a gap in the country.
I think that once they put this horrific health care bill out there and put it on the people, first of all, it's going to affect the red states the most because they use the most welfare in the country.
Right.
In a way, I'm hoping they pass it. Okay, because that might be the final thing that wakes these people up when they go to their doctor for their drug diseases and whatever else they have, to find out they have no coverage, and they voted for it. Just like voting for, Candle in Georgia, who says she's against the livable wage.
Right.
So, maybe that's what those people need to snap out of it. When I was a kid, my father, of course, my sister and I, we excelled in high school. But I would say, in New York City, high school probably gave us more than a college education at that time. But when it came to college, my father said no. He said people go to college to get stupid. And, I resented him for a couple of years. I got in the business workforce. In those years, you could get promoted. You got expected raises. You got expected promotions. You had all kinds of coverage, all kinds of perks.
Right.
So I was making a college salary by the time I was 20 because I had experience. But looking back, I realized my father was right. There's never a day that I don't wonder, how did he know all that stuff? How is he that smart? But he
had
did
some
teach.
foresight, especially now. What would he be
Right.
saying about now?
Oh my God! I say every day to my parents who are no longer alive, man, you guys are so happy. You got to be so happy you're not alive anymore to see what has happened to this world, let alone our country.
Yeah.
Now, when you talk about in your book, though, this is not an issue of the rich just, messing everybody over in the United States. This is worldwide. And I thought about that fire in that London apartment building and the people there claiming that this was another attack on the poor. The building didn't have the right protections on it. They had no warning signals, nothing. And they were sitting on a very expensive property.
Right.
I
think there, and that's, as I put in the book, I think there's, we talk about class warfare, class envy, and it's always by the conservatives to say that that any mention, if you point out any of these obvious things, then you're showing envy and you're exhibiting class warfare. When it's obvious, it's so obvious that we have become almost like the proles in 1984,
right,
where we have the numbers, but we are just too dumbed down, and we don't look out for our own interest, and we're letting a very small minority of people continue to wage war for us. The rich have been waging war. You go back to the Middle Ages. This has been happening forever, and it's just the baby boomers were fooled because our childhood and our upbringing was the greatest time in American history financially for the most amount of people because of the post-war boom. And we paid a huge price for that. All the people that died in World War II and the growth of the military-industrial complex created a lot of the problems that we see in other areas that I talked about in Hidden History. But it did give us a great, and for a while there, and you had a high tax rate, and it wasn't until Reagan where the tax rate got completely slashed.
Right, another B actor. Another B actor.
Exactly, and that's why you had, you didn't have equality. You certainly still had, incredibly rich people, but back then, this term CEO hadn't even been invented.
Right.
There were no such thing as Hispanics to constantly come across the border that you somehow aren't protecting, to come in and do the jobs. I tell people all the time, I say, who do you think used to mow the lawns and do landscaping and somebody used to do it. It's not like America, but it's the idea that somehow this is just like the same one with the visa workers. They act as if there's some kind of skill there that Americans don't possess, when obviously there are tons and tons of people out of work or being underpaid.
Right, but I have to tell you, Donald, living here in Arizona, there's no way. Okay, I've been out here 26 years, okay? Today it's going to be another 121-degree day, okay? I can honestly tell you that no white person I know is going to get out there and do landscaping at any time of the year here. And I was, coming from New York, I was really surprised when we hired these Mexican landscapers, and it was, probably 110 degrees while they're out there, sweating their asses off, and they're whistling a happy tune. They were happy doing it. To me, it was mind-blowing. I was bringing them out iced tea like every 10 minutes. I was worried that they were going to just faint over. And I saw an article this morning where farmers are begging Trump. They said they want their Mexicans back. They tried in California to double the rate for pickers, and no one showed up for those jobs.
Well, I think, especially with the attitude that Mexicans have and so forth, again, I think that's the danger of your immigration coming from such incredibly impoverished areas where they're coming from circumstances we can't even understand. So when they come into America, even though we see the standard of living decreasing for us, but their standard of living is undeniably going up. But the problem is America is lifting them up from awful third world circumstances. It's not lifting them up to anywhere near the kind of middle class that we used to have.
Right.
So the problem is it drags everybody down with it, and they have that attitude, I believe, because it's better for them here. But Americans, have the attitude, I think everyone kind of senses it, that things are going down the tubes, and everyone understands that.
Well, the past few years, believe it or not, more Mexicans have left America than come in. Donald, we need to take a short break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Hi, this is Meria Heller. If you're enjoying this show, please consider listening to the rest of it, along with hundreds of other hours of education, by a small subscription on my site. get over to meria.net, meria.net. You are the only thing that supports this show. There's no corporate control, and there's plenty of education on site. So please consider either a subscription or a donation to keep the work going. There are too many alternative voices out there that are being silenced because of lack of support. So if you don't want MSM to be the only mind-controlling news out there, please consider supporting the people that support you and help us all save something for the future for our children. Thank you so much.